What's up, guys? Welcome to the Westworld Companion Podcast presented by The Disorderly. We just watched the Season 2 finale, which means that this is also our Season 2 finale, entitled The Passenger. Season 2, Episode 10, The Passenger, which plays with this whole concept that humans are basically the product of their programming, sophisticated enough to think that they're making their own choices, but they're really just sort of acting according to their code. So essentially, we're all just a passenger on this journey through life. Pretty dark concept there. I guess that fits with the show, so it's not too shocking. But in turn, they're implying that these conscious robots are actually in control of their lives because they're able to question and change their fundamental drives, making them truly free. A lot of dense concepts right there, right in the beginning, just right at the start of the finale, just with the title. So that kind of sets the pace for the entire thing. So I had a lot of sort of internal discussions about how to present this episode because it is wildly dense. I'll say this, I watched it once. Very confused, and that's, with me taking notes and everything. I watched it a second time, took some more notes. That kind of cleared things up. I'd already read a recap at that point. I've listened to podcasts at that point. So what you're getting is the sort of combination of all the information that I've gathered over the past couple days, and I'm going to do my best to tell this in a clear way because obviously the finale struggles with that. And by the way, I guess the ratings are low on this one. The ratings have dropped in general. I meant reviews, sorry. The reviews are low, like Rotten Tomatoes scores, things like that. The ratings of the show have dropped. It seems like, if I had to guess, I feel like people are just quitting on this show because it's too complicated. Like, I've thought about this. What do you do? Like, so I'm watching every episode multiple times with a notebook, taking really intense, like, diligent notes, pausing it, writing things down, discussing it, which also reinforces a lot of these concepts, and I'm still struggling to follow the show. So if you're a regular viewer who just watches it Sunday night and then, puts it on the shelf for a week and then just watches the next episode the next week, I don't know how you get through. I don't know how you don't get completely lost, which is fine. It's like a smart show, I guess. I like that kind of thing. I like, Leftovers had a lot of really intense mystery and reveals, and, they tested the audience's patience a lot, and I love that show. This might be overkill. But anyway, so let me do my best to clear up the timelines here, the best I can. So I'm going to get into a full plot recap, which will take a little while. I mean, this is it's an hour and a half, so it's longer than normal, and just more, even in that time, so much happened. It's a really dense episode, so it's going to take me a while to get through that, but I'm going to start with just kind of clearing up the timelines the best I can. So we find out at the end of the episode that Dolores' brain is now inside Charlotte Hale's body. So all the stuff we see from Bernard waking up on the beach in the first episode, everything beyond that, all that stuff took place 2 weeks after the killing of Ford. So remember that Strand, who, Carl Strand, he's the head of the Delos security team, he arrived 2 weeks later. So anytime we see him and Hale together, that's really Dolores inside Hale's body. All right, that's a little visual clue for you throughout the season. It actually be somewhat interesting to go back and watch the whole season now knowing that's Dolores. That might be rewarding. I don't know. I'm about to do that with Monica anyway, so we'll see. Everything else we see in this episode is essentially, what took place in the last couple of days before the Delos security team arrived on the beach. So it is actually a pretty linear episode. I mean, it bounces back and forth, but it's all like either 2 weeks ahead or a couple of days prior to that. It's all pretty straightforward. And actually, once you realize that, there's actually some really cool shots. Like when Hale and Delos, the security team, goes into the forge for the first time, and the elevator door closes, and then it opens back up, and it's Dolores standing there, like in the same spot as far as how the camera's oriented, which is a nice little nod to the fact that they're the same person. Or there's a point where they're showing Hale on screen, but you're hearing a Dolores voiceover. It's just like cool little, just film tricks that I thought was cool, knowing that obviously they're the same person. Also, to address this right away too, everyone has a different reason for going to the Valley Beyond. So as far as, this whole episode is all the major characters in the show converging to the same spot more or less, and they're all doing it for different reasons. So Ford was driving everyone there because there's a door to a robot paradise. He gave he gave the host the internal drive or whatever to go find out, go seek that opening, led by Akishita, but they all kind of were drawn to this. So that's Ford's motive. Dolores is heading there to acquire all the knowledge of the park guest so she can, use it as a weapon to undo mankind and have the robots basically survive and take over the real world. And William presumably wanted to destroy the guest data as well, but doesn't quite get there because he blows his hand off. We'll get to that in the plot recap, but that's sort of the core motives for all these people going to, the Valley Beyond or whatever, the Forge. There's a million names for it. Glory. All right, so I feel like I need a glass of water or something. Plot recap time. I'm going to try to make this clear. I'm going to try to make it interesting because it's long. But yeah, so here we go. We open up on Dolores doing the fidelity test on Bernard and find out this is trial number 11,927. So she's been doing this for a long time. We then see Dolores laying with Teddy, who killed himself last episode. She then pulls his brain out, as well as the spent bullet that apparently can't penetrate the brain because I guess it's bulletproof. It looks like a squish bullet that you would see, if something just hit like a bulletproof vest or something. But she ends up riding off and bumping into William, who is still digging in his arm for a port, trying to figure out if he's a human or not. The music, by the way, builds up as if we're about to get like a huge reveal as to whether he's a human or a robot. But then Dolores pulls his own gun on him, and the music cuts out quick, like effectively keeping that secret from us. I feel like that was intentional. So we still don't really know if he was what conclusion he drew from the fact that he was digging in his arm. Anyway, they link up and take off for the Valley Beyond. Meanwhile, the real Charlotte Hale is following Clementine, who's now a secret robot-destroying weapon, to the Valley Beyond, the same place that the Ghost Nation is leading a bunch of the hosts. Seemingly at the same time, Maeve takes control of some nearby hosts using the gift that Ford gave her and kills all the humans, heals herself up. We get a slow-motion bull stampede, and at the end of that, the crew is back together. Maeve, Hector, Lee, Felix, Sylvester, Armistice, and the Shogun version of Armistice. William and Dolores get to the Forge, or the giant cradle that contains all the data on the park guest. Remember, the cradle has all the data on the host, and the Forge where they're storing all these files on the park guest, all the data they've been collecting. And they get there right as Bernard's arriving there as well. We discover that Dolores is the one who built Bernard, not Ford. Ford tasked Dolores with recreating Arnold because, she spent so much time with him, she could recreate him more perfectly. So she did that after all those trials, but she, according to her, the recreation was too perfect. So it kept arriving at the same conclusion as the real Arnold, where he would ultimately kill Dolores that he would ultimately get killed by Dolores. He'd put a gun in her hand and be like, "You have to kill me." He'd keep driving towards that same thing. So what she ended up doing was changing him into a better version of Arnold, known as Bernard. So after this, William tries to kill Dolores, but she's unaffected by gunshots to the body. Likely because the pain tolerance is way up, although there's some inconsistencies of Maeve at the end there. We'll get to that later. But on the final shot pointed right at her head, the gun backfires and blows off his fingers. This is because Dolores put the smashed up Teddy bullet in the chamber, and they leave him lying there with, 8 fingers or a mangled hand or whatever, as Dolores and Bernard continue on into the Forge. So we then jump ahead to the current timeline for the first time in the episode. Hale, who is secretly Dolores at this point, and the Delos security team are leading a very confused Bernard to the Forge. This is the plot that started on the beach in the beginning of episode 1. They're still looking for the Peter Abernathy control unit, which contains an encryption key with all the data on the park guest, or at least I think they said it was a test. It wasn't supposed to be all the data, but they find Dolores lying dead on the ground, which is a pretty crazy reveal if you think about it. It's like one of the main characters just lying dead on the ground, and we don't know how she got there at this point, obviously. Flashback to Bernard and Dolores, who plug in the Peter Abernathy control unit and pop into a simulated version of the park. So it looks like they're in James Delos' loop, actually. So perhaps that's the encryption key that Delos is trying to smuggle out of the park, the one that was in Peter Abernathy's head. It looks like it was the file containing all of his data. So Dolores and Bernard start in that white room from the James Delos fidelity test and then pop into a simulated version of Sweetwater where they can see his behavior in the park, the first time he's in the park. They said it's a baseline. And it's all part of recreating an exact copy of a human. So they conclude that small changes in programming result in huge swings in behavior and that humans are just simple code, far less complex than robots. That's really the central theme they're trying to drive home. Essentially, we were overthinking it when we were trying to reprogram a perfect human. We were making them too complex, and they're actually very simple, I guess. I guess we're just simple. We also get this whole Inception scene where we're walking through the memories of James Delos. It reminded me a lot, if you've seen Inception, the elevator that Leo built, where all his big, life-changing memories were all stored in this place. That's kind of what we were going through with James Delos, and people are walking through his memories, including, by the way, the defining moment of his life, which is when he turned his junkie son, Logan, away while he was asking for help, eventually leading to his death from an overdose. So that was a pretty haunting moment at the end there where he tells his dad that he's all the way down now, that he could see the bottom, which, of course, is the same phrasing that the zombie James Delos, the one that was cutting up his own face, was muttering in the scene earlier in the season, when Bernard and Elsie were with him or whatever. I think it was them, right? I don't know, but yeah, the horror movie James Delos is muttering the same words, which makes it clear that memory still haunts him, which is a really dark, haunting thought. But I mean, I like that kind of stuff in shows, so I thought it was cool, just freaky. During this scene, they get super into the process of copying humans, but I can do that at the end. I spelled it out, but it's complicated and doesn't really affect the plot. It's a cool thematic thing, but I'll get into that later for those interested in all the technical stuff. But it turns out Bernard was the one who orchestrated the whole thing and gave Dolores access to the human data library. She gets what she needs to destroy humanity by reading a handful of books somehow. On the park guest, like each book's supposed to represent a file from all the data collected on a specific park guest or in a huge library. And the whole point is that this will give her a competitive advantage over humanity, who obviously has the edge in numbers and just being established, whatever. In the war of robots versus humans, they're basically trying to arm Dolores with the full knowledge of who humans are, because I guess they're predictable. By the way, one of the books she grabs is the Carl Strand file, which is just interesting. I don't know if she used that to manipulate him when she was Hale or whatever, but it was interesting that you see her literally looking through his specific book. Meanwhile, Maeve's crew is pinned down by the Della security team, but Lee is able to hold them off until everyone escapes. He kind of steps up and he's a hero, and he also goes down in a Sonny Corleone-esque blaze of glory. So rest in peace to Lee, one of my favorite characters in the show, made me laugh multiple times. Didn't want to scoot past that scene. Although, obviously not the most important. Maeve arrives at the Valley Beyond at the same time as the Ghost Nation and all the other hosts. Bernard opens the digital door that only the hosts can see, and they run through it, so their bodies are sort of left behind while their minds go into this virtual paradise. So this is a Garden of Eden type situation that Ford created for the hosts to be able to run through and be free and happy, away from the humans, create their own world. Bernard opens that door. All the hosts run through it. Well, not all, but a bunch of them do, and they're all kind of waiting in line to go through it. Buzzkill Dolores doesn't like this concept of paradise, and basically says that it's just another trick. It's another illusion that they're trying to, they can't really be free unless we're in the real world. So she decides she's going to destroy all the guest data and close that digital door. She also causes the flood. So basically, seawater is used as a cooling system for this massive computer lab, and she lets all that seawater out, flooding the valley and explaining where that mystery sea came from. At the beginning of season 1, they're like, there's not supposed to be water here. That's because they flooded it. She has a philosophical conversation with Bernard, who ultimately kills her because he's trying to stop her from hurting more people, whether it be robots or humans. They have a huge fundamental difference in their approach to all that. He's still trying to ride both teams or whatever. So he kills Dolores, and that's why we see Dolores' body laying there in the previous scene. So the Della forces arrive as the hosts are making their way to the door. Clementine, it's actually a really cool scene. Clementine walks through on a horse. She's like walking through, and then it goes into a gallop, and because she has that power that Charlotte Hale gave her, as she's doing that, all the guests are destroying each other, which I thought was really cool. Armistice kills her, but it's too late. It seems like the message is already getting passed through the mesh network, so even though she's gone, it's still going. But Maeve is able to save her daughter and Akecheta, but pretty much everyone else dies. There's a whole bunch of dead hosts in this scene. But back to Dolores, with her dead, Bernard's able to cancel the data purge and grab Peter Abernathy's control unit, little marble thing in his head, but he still floods the forge. He doesn't stop that. So I guess he's okay with doing that. So all the hosts that didn't escape through the door died and ended up floating in the sea from episode 1. Also could be why Bernard is like, I killed them, because he kind of did. He was able to stop the flood, and he didn't. But Bernard, Elsie, and Hale end up back at the Mesa, where Elsie betrays Bernard and tries to cut a deal with Hale. Hale just shoots her instead, leading Bernard to see the evil in humanity. I feel like that was kind of a last straw for him. He obviously cared about Elsie. As the last robot still alive, he is left with a choice. He can either continue the robot race or have it end with him, and he chooses to keep it alive. Back in the present timeline, Hale, who is really Dolores, finds the encryption key buried in the old Dolores dead body, which is probably trippy for her to dig through her own corpse or whatever. But the Delos security team starts to upload it to the satellites out of the park. They're going to beam it over to Delos headquarters until they realize that it contains a way bigger file than it should. It's at this point that Bernard reveals that he brought Dolores back in Hale's body and scrambled his own memories so Delos couldn't hack into his mind and figure this out, basically. Or de-address his memories, I think is the term they used. Anyway, Hale then kills Strand and all the other humans there. Dolores takes the Teddy control, Dolores in Hale's body takes the Teddy control unit that she removed at the beginning of the episode and uploads it to the robot paradise, effectively saving Teddy. Nice little bow tie in his story. She then changes the coordinates of the satellite and blasts them to some place where no human will ever find them. And we don't ever figure out where this place is. I'm sure it'll come up again. I'm sure we'll figure this out in season 3, but as of now, we still don't know. Finally, I'm sorry. Once again, guys, I know it's a lot of plot in this one. Finally, Hale kills Bernard, so she can sneak his brain ball out in her bag. So she's got a little purse full of all these brain balls. Back at the Delos security outpost, they're evacuating the surviving park guests. We find out that William survived, but don't know what happened to him between him loading his gun up in the elevator down to the forge and him sitting on the beach, what we just saw at the outpost. Big missing gap of time there. Stubbs also gives a real cryptic speech to Hale before letting her through. He definitely implies that he knows Hale is a host, but also possibly admits that he's a host. That's a little unclear. It could have been him just using host terminology to subtly imply that he's onto her or whatever. Because he says, you could say that's my cornerstone. So I don't know. But either way, he lets her go without any issue. A little smirk on his face. Felix and Sylvester are then asked to grab any hosts that they think they can salvage, and they both kind of look at Maeve. So it seems like, they may bring her back. And we see that Hale's purse contains 5 brain balls. 5. The identity of which are a mystery. So there's another mystery for you. Well, it turns out Ford finished building Arnold's house, and Dolores is there, hard at work rebuilding the host she snuck out of the park. Dynamic is established where Bernard and Dolores are going to be enemies, sort of competing for different interests, which will likely lead to their deaths, but the ultimate survival of their kind. And this is kind of something that Dolores is like, listen, if I was human, I would just let you die because you're going to work against my interests, but because I'm better than a human, I need you to keep me in check because it's going to ultimately ensure the survival of our kind, of the robot people in the real world. Which, by the way, the guys at Bald Move described it as a Professor Xavier and Magneto situation, which I thought was a perfect comparison. So there you have it, season 2. But wait, there's a post-credit sequence with William riding down the elevator. At first, it seems like this is filling in the gap of time that we missed prior to William arriving at the beach, because that's kind of where we cut off. But the injuries are consistent with the ones Dolores gave him. There's a lot of clues pointing to the fact that this is a continuation from the last scene of him going down the elevator. But then explain this. He is in a flooded forge, and his daughter is there dressed up nicely and perfectly clean. He questions whether he's in a simulation, and she assures him that he's not. She could obviously be lying, but she assures him that this is not a simulation. Apparently, this is a fidelity test, much like the one that James Delos underwent. When is this, though? Or is this now would be the more appropriate way to ask that question. We have no idea. Apparently, it's been a long time. This whole process has taken way longer than expected, and the system is long gone, but that's all the info we're given. So we don't really know what that is. That was a very confusing post-credit sequence. It was cool. I don't know if I understand it. I heard some theories. I don't really buy any of that. I don't know. I really don't know. That's a crazy thing. But finally, that's it. The end of the plot. Whew. Exhausting. By the way, I'm doing this in my car on my lunch break. I got bags full of clothes, bags full of toiletry stuff. I'm in the process of moving right now. It's a real shit show in here. But, hey, dedication to the craft, right? So let's talk about some of the cliffhangers. There's 2 major ones. We kind of addressed them or whatever. But which hosts are being smuggled out of the park in Charlotte Hale's bag? We learned that two of the balls contain Dolores and Bernard, or possibly Hale. Like, there's that final scene where they're doing the fidelity test, trying to rebuild Bernard, and it's Dolores looking like Dolores doing this. She's in a futuristic dress or whatever, but we see that. And then also Charlotte Hale, or a girl who looks like Charlotte Hale, is outside of the glass. We don't hear her talk. Is that Charlotte Hale? Are there 2 Doloreses now? Like, is that the Dolores that was in Charlotte Hale's body, and Dolores just built another Dolores? Because that could be an interesting concept to play with as well. How they differ, even though they're based on the same thing. Like, do their experiences change them and make them go down different paths? I don't know. That'd be interesting. And I guess either is possible. We'll have to wait and see on that. And the other big question, obviously, is what's up with William being on a fidelity loop with his daughter? So maybe William's moment that defined his life, similar to James Delos and his junkie son overdosing. For William, maybe it was when he shot his daughter in the park. That could explain why he keeps going back to it no matter what simulation they run. He keeps going back to this moment, much like James Delos kept going back to that moment. He turned his son away. And sure enough, his son, if you remember, was the one that represented the system for James Delos. So perhaps, that's all tied in together. So for William, the system is represented by his daughter. That's the one that's familiar with him. That's the one that conducts this fidelity test and runs this simulation version of him or whatever. Sort of like an Uber cornerstone drive. It's all based around that one moment that defines your life, which that's an interesting concept as well. I like that. I think there's a lot to play with there. And also, as far as this being a long time, and this, if it really isn't a simulation, it's possible they just got like a perfect version and they're testing him out in like the human flesh like suit or whatever. Like with James Delos, they ran the simulation millions of times. Once they got a perfect replica version of James Delos, they popped that bad boy in a robot suit, and that's when all the problems are happening. So this could be that level of the test where they're already testing the human version of William because they already recreated him perfectly. And speaking of fidelity, I've got a few plot infidelities. You like that? A little play on words there. How in the world does William not recognize Bernard? So I get that, he's involved in the secret project. He's not involved in Ford's narratives, whatever. But even if he doesn't recognize Arnold, which I guess I understand because Arnold died before the park was open, has he never seen Bernard? Bernard's like a super important employee of Westworld, of the theme park. I know that he had that deal with Ford where he's going to stay out of things, but I still feel like he'd bump into him at some point, no? Bernard's a super high-value employee. So when he walks in, he's like, who's that? And he's like, you don't recognize him? Yeah, I'm shocked too, Dolores. I feel like he definitely should recognize him. Probably different reasons behind the shock, but what are you going to do? Also, it's pretty goddamn lucky that William didn't shoot Dolores in the head with one of those real bullets, right? It seems like you get shot in the head, you're done. We literally saw Bernard do that to her in a later scene. So he shot her in the chest 5 times, which also, the fact that smash bullet happened to be in that 6th spot, it's just, I don't know. I get it, it's whatever, it's the magic of writing, television writing or whatever, but I don't know. That part was pretty lame. It just seemed like a pretty big gamble by Dolores. Also, and this goes to that inconsistency I was pointing to before, how was Dolores able to eat those bullets, right? So she just was getting shot in the chest, walking right through it, not affected. I assumed it's because her pain tolerance was turned all the way up. But we also have Super Maeve, the one that can control a friggin' Stampede and all these other people and have someone come over and adjust all her pain tolerances and stuff. And she got shot in the chest at the end there when they were closing the door. She's trying to save her daughter. She got shot in the chest and she went right down and died. Well, why? She didn't get shot in the head. I feel like she'd have the same powers as Dolores to not die in that situation. So I don't know. Also, and this one might have an explanation, but William ran the test on James Delos, right? So he should know what his daughter is verifying. In that final scene, he's like, what are you verifying? And she says, fidelity. And he's like, oh, it seemed like he didn't know, or maybe he had a knowing smirk on his face or something. But when he was doing that to James Delos, he's done this test a bunch of times, right? So he would know exactly. He even recognized. He's like, oh man, I'm here, aren't I? This is the he recognized the simulation, so he should know that. Yeah, of course you're testing fidelity. That's the whole project, right? That's how you recreate a human or whatever. I don't know. Maybe you could just chalk that up to confusion because he's kind of malfunctioning. At this point, it seems like, I don't know. Hard to say. But yeah, that's all I really have. I'm gonna do a deep dive into how to copy a human for those interested in the technical thing because I watched it twice, took notes, might as well talk about it. It's obviously not real, although maybe it could be. I don't know. But yeah, I'll get into that in a second. But just thoughts on this. I loved season 1, specifically the finale, so much that this is never gonna live up to it. I didn't hate this. I'm hearing a lot of negative stuff about it. It took me 2 watches. First, I walked away with a bad taste in my mouth after the first watch. After watching it again, I was like, all right, I don't hate this. It was cool how things tied in. I thought there were some really good performances, some really good pieces of writing, and just filming. When they showed, like I said, all the Hale Dolores crossover stuff. There's just some cool scenes, some cool imagery. I don't know. I liked it. I really did like it. I think this season was up and down. I also fall in a different place than a lot of people with a lot of this stuff where, the Akishita episode where they're showing his whole thing that everyone was like, oh, I loved it so much. Nah, not me, man. I thought it was boring as shit. I think I talked about it in the thing. It was all right, but it's just I can't get too into. This is my problem I have with Dolores and Teddy. I can't get too invested in these host love stories because I know they're not real. I guess they're trying to show us that they are, but it's like I don't know, man. The Akishita episode didn't do it for me. It was okay, and I recognize it was good, and it's probably going to win awards or be eligible at least, but I don't know. It wasn't my favorite, so I actually like these kind of episodes more. My favorite all-time episode, I think on both seasons, but definitely in the second season, was the James Delos Fidelity episode. I thought it was really cool. It had a Lost type vibe to it. I don't know, man. That's what I'm drawn more towards. So this, it wasn't bad. It, like I said, it took a lot of intense focus because it was so much packed into an hour and a half episode. But I don't know. I mean, I'm excited for season 3. I'm sure. By the way, we're in a knee-jerk reaction society too, where it's people who are like, that's it. I didn't like this season. I was confused. I'm done. When they start doing promos for season 3, people are gonna get excited for Westworld again. Once you sit on it for a little while and maybe watch a quick recap video or preview of the season, which by the way I'm sure we'll do one, so definitely watch ours. I don't know. I feel like I think people talk a big game. I think they'll all come crawling back. It's a good show. It's HBO primetime. What are you gonna do? Watch something else? Speaking of, Succession's coming out. I don't know. I might soon. It's coming either today or tomorrow. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, I'll come out with a session podcast. I'm also going to start doing Dark Places, I think, now that I have all this time open with Westworld. That'll be cool, too, because Dark Places... Sharp Objects. Dark Places is the Charlize Theron movie, also done by Gillian Flynn, the girl who wrote Gone Girl. So Sharp Objects is what it's called. I'm going to do a Sharp Objects podcast as well, some sort of midweek companion. So sticking with the HBO primetime theme until they let me down. I'm gonna keep doing that. But yeah, that's it. That's my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. I've never done one of these companion podcasts. This is the first one we've attempted it on. Crazy undertaking given the density of this show. But I enjoyed it. It definitely made it was a lot of work, but it brought more out of the show for me. Like, it's like forcing myself to literally take notes and dive into other podcasts and stuff. It really made this show like a real experience. I almost wish I did it for season 1, but what are you going to do? I'm looking forward to doing it for like a Game of Thrones final season. That's going to be pretty wild. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Head over to thedisorderly.com for the best in sports and entertainment. I'm doing these podcasts. I do write-ups every now and then. I'm doing a weekly baseball column with, just news and notes from around the league, highlights, power rankings, my own personal power rankings, whatever. So if you're a baseball fan, check that out. You can find us on Twitter at Disorderly Media or on Facebook at Disorderly ENT. And then I'm on Twitter at Nick Risner, NickRizner. My DMs are open for any comments about this. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and a comment. By the way, we've had some discussion starting there, and I really like that. If you're watching anywhere else, Stitcher, iTunes, the Laughable app. Shout out Laughable. I love those guys. Just rate, review, subscribe, and just share it around. Pass this around. Pass the link around. That's the biggest thing you can do for us, honestly. And that'll do it. So for those who wanted to stick around for this, it's short. It's short. You can see how much time is left in the episode, but here is how to copy a human according to the Westworld writers. So this is how it works. Focusing on James Delos, they essentially record his actual behavior in the park by using one of those brain-scanning cowboy hats, right? Then they make little tweaks to his actual programming until they get a simulated version of James Delos that makes the same exact decisions as the real version. This takes a lot of trial runs. So for James Delos, it took over 18 million versions, little tweaks. Every time they tweak something small, it drastically changes his behavior 18 million times over, at least, before they made a perfect copy. However, once they extracted that perfect copy from the simulation and put it into an actual host body, it would start to break down. This is the version of those fidelity tests that we saw with William and James Delos talking in that white room, where he was lasting longer, but he'd ultimately fail. What that was once they finally had a perfect simulation, they popped that into a host body, and it didn't work. So essentially, they were attempting to put the perfect copy into a host body, but it kept failing. In millions of simulations, every version of James Delos led back to the same life-defining moment, which for him was the turning away of his junkie son. So the ultimate takeaway is that humans don't change at all. The best they can do is live according to their code, which is a very simple one. The copies didn't fail because they were too simple. They failed because they're too complicated. Apparently, a human is just 10,247 lines of code, which basically, written out is the size of a novel, apparently. I didn't verify that, but I take their word for it. And apparently, because us humans are so simple, we're also super predictable, giving Dolores the ability to read a few books at the Human Data Library and understanding all of humanity. So there you have it, a deep dive on the process of a mortal robot building. I hope that was clear. I actually think that scene was pretty clear, where Logo's explaining all that. I think they did a good job executing that. But, so this is officially the end of the podcast now. I will see you guys elsewhere. I don't know. You want to watch Succession with me? I'm doing those weekly. Like I said, Sharp Objects. I'll start doing a companion podcast for that. And then that baseball post come out pretty consistently as well. 3 months of doing that on a weekly basis, by the way. That's also exhausting, but I'm still riding strong. It also made baseball season a lot more interesting for me as well. But there you go. I'm tired. Lunch break ended 5 minutes ago, and I really don't want to lose my job. So I'll see you guys later. Peace.